Welcome back to the show, everyone. So, because I'm here and you're here, that means that somebody is on the chopping block today, and this time it's actually Sony, in a move that's pretty damn unfortunate, because from what I understand, they've really messed up a pretty damn major release beat, and when we get into the why, it's, kind of fascinating. Also, if you try to portray yourself and the games that you're putting out there as a very premium brand, then you cannot be doing things that get you a 33% negative on Steam. So let's actually just get into that. This whole idea of being a premium brand with this massive, these massive tentpole IP games that do super well and are literal system sellers, that is so important to Sony. I mean, even though Game Pass has been a strong thing that we've been talking about for years, at the end of the day, the PS5 has pretty much walloped the Xbox Series X, right? Like, that's just the way that it's went down. But the thing to Sony is that after one of these games has been out for like a year or a bit, well, it's not really needed to sell the system anymore, so why not put it on PC and make some money? But unfortunately, today's story reminds us quite a lot of the first time they did this with Horizon Zero Dawn. It had a lot of messiness, and it did kind of give the whole PlayStation PC port thing a fairly bad name. But then what happened? Well, the likes of God of War came out. God of War that people were running on a Ryzen APU because, its performance was that damn impressive. As for this with The Last of Us Part 1 Remastered, it released March 28th. It's got 5,600 reviews with 33% positive. Now, this has been developed by Naughty Dog and also Iron Galaxy. Now, Iron Galaxy have done many ports, some fine, some a bit less fine. Okay, what have they done? Well, the likes of Spyro and the Crash trilogies. Alright, fair enough, probably not the hardest thing to port in the world. But then also the Arkham PC ports. I think, was it Arkham Knight? The one where you could, drive around in the Batmobile or whatever, and it all looked quite impressive. That's the one that, it launched on PC in a state so bad. Did they have to unlaunch it? I just remember that being a humongous drama going on at the time. I remember Total Biscuit covering it. Anyway, they have previously worked with Naughty Dog, though, on Uncharted Legacy of Thieves Collection PC port, which Digital Foundry said, and really, Digital Foundry, they're the people you go to get a very good educated opinion backed up by a lot of technical analysis, and they said it was an accomplished but unambitious PC port, which, at the end of the day, is pretty much, it's mostly what we would want, right? We just want it to be good. We want the bloody thing to work. But unfortunately, this is where a few things start to get a bit weird, a bit fishy. So this is what they said before, right? Naughty Dog basically talked about their deep involvement in making this port, right? So they did that. There was a launch day blog post that was all about the complexity of working with this and how it was actually quite difficult to move from PS5 to PS4. Look at this. Moving it to PC meant a large amount of tuning, tweaking, and even rethinking, especially when it came to how we utilized the GPU. So, they're saying, we didn't just throw this off to the porting house. No, this was a deep collaboration, and we had to do a lot of work because it was optimized for PS5. Now, if you can feel the start of a future story thread coming in here, then very good. I can as well. So the pre-launch is interesting here because it was clearly meant to coincide with the end of the TV show, which it actually didn't. Now, it did get close, right? Yeah, it did get close. Obviously, transmedia narrative, it's super important. It's obviously super important to Sony. I mean, they've got multiple TV shows going on. Even trying to do the Uncharted movie for some reason. But the thing is, this was originally supposed to come out on the 3rd of March, which pretty much would have been just in time for the final episode of the series. Now, I'm not saying that this missing that date is going to have any humongous impact on them. It's just the fact that they did need to kick it back. They did need to buy some additional time. In this case, just, 25 days. Now, you may think 25 days, that's plenty of time for people to work. Well, 25 days on the calendar is not 25 working days, but somehow I suspect that, I think some weekend work may have been pulled on this one, given where things are going to go in today's story. So they just said that they wanted to make sure it was in the best shape possible. All right, best shape possible. Keep that in your head for later. These additional few weeks will allow us to ensure that this will live up to your and our standards. Ensure, as it turns out, may not have been the best word for them to have used. Now, I imagine this is probably not the way the engineers would have phrased this blog post, but Hey, it is what it is. Communications be communications. Promises were made also by Neil Druckmann in December 2022 that this would be another PC port that made use of the Steam Deck. Right, Ellie and Joel will grace the Steam Deck, don't worry. That is, that's a bold statement. We all love the Steam Deck. I can actually give you a very interesting number from our game, The Pale Beyond, and it really shocked me. So 10% of the Pale Beyond sales are actually Steam Deck. Obviously, if somebody buys it in Deck, they can play it on, regular desktop as well. But we actually do see what hardware people are using in the Steam backend. And yeah, 10%. Now, obviously, our game is an indie narrative game, so I think people would buy that with the expectation of the Steam Deck, and I really think that it fits, it's a very good experience on that format. But to me, it was just surprising, and it really showed, holy shit, Valve have sold a lot of decks. And I was continually getting questions from people up until the launch of our game, hey, will it be in Deck? Will it be on Deck? Will it be on Deck? So, as much as, I normally wouldn't have put too much stock in this sort of thing, no, Deck actually really does matter to people. Now, of course, the thing with the Deck is it's not the most powerful piece of kit in the universe. I think there are actually some handhelds that are more powerful. That said, if you're more powerful in terms of, your raw horsepower, well, depending what operating system you're running and all that, because the Steam Deck is actually, it's pretty damn efficient at what it does. But still, it would be a massive challenge to get this game running on Deck, okay? Not as hard as getting in the Switch, but certainly hard. However, the game is actually not flagged by Valve as being compatible or being verified for the Steam Deck. Now, being verified for the Deck is easy enough. You just, submit your build and, you'll hear back actually pretty quickly, I believe, with Valve's, rating. So that's a bit weird, and, in a world where there is no Sony portable console, people may as well be using their decks as a Vita, and to be honest, I think we'd all love to see Sony do some sort of portable things. Even I think it's the original, the PSP 2000 and PSP 3000, and then the Vita, they're all actually very beloved by people. You may not know this, it's really fascinating. They're loved by people, especially great for a lot of emulation, a lot of homebrew stuff. Hey, the Vita was sitting there with an OLED screen way ahead of the rest of the industry, an amazing piece of kit. So when Sony don't offer some sort of official solution, obviously people are going to want something like this, and I really do think that some form of hardware there would, for Sony, make quite a lot of sense, given, their Game Pass-like offering. I could see something like that doing significantly better than their virtual reality efforts in terms of, their bottom line. Anyway, maybe that's food for thought, but to continue going, none of this prevented it from being a top seller on Steam. Now, we just released the game. I know what it's like to actually navigate up and down the top seller list. I think we peaked at 13 or 14, but the way this list works, right, is that it's essentially based on revenue gross. So generally, that's why you'll find the Steam Deck is, the Steam Deck's always floating around up there, and it'll have a bias towards sort of larger AAAs, just because asking price big, right? Now, it's, compared to the other Sony games, not massive, it was in the middle of Sony's output with 23k peak players. Spider-Man, of course, was at 66k, God of War was at 73k, so this is definitely not in the upper range, but I think for what this game is, and the PC market, and also the fact that this is a game that came out in 2012. Didn't it come out in 2012 for the first time, then 2014 for the second time, and of course now for the third time, because it's not a remaster of the remaster, because actually I think quite a lot of this was a lot of remaking. It was a pretty deep technical project. But the problem is then, when we go to the reviews. So, there aren't really any critical reviews from the critics. Number one, I'd say, why bother? We all know what this game is. But also, it's just been a few people on YouTube, a few post-launch reviews, and that's actually not how it's went for the first few Sony PC ports. Returnal had day-and-date reviews, Uncharted Legacy of Thieves, another Iron Galaxy port, that had launch day reviews, so it does actually raise some alarm bells here. Were Sony aware that this was not actually going to be landing that hot, that it was going to have issues? That's the thing that I think about, especially when that blog post said the word ensure, ensure a good experience. And the public response is fucking scathing. It really is. We're at a 66% negative, which actually puts it just below everyone's favorite punching bag, Battlefield 2042, which I actually have from opinion that I really do trust. A lot of commentary that game has really got itself in a better position. But anyway, enough tangents. Here's one of the top reviews just saying 14 crashes in 4.5 hours of playtime. Apparently VRAM is a very egregious issue. It's basically asking for more than what some common cards are providing, which means people are going to have to drop their settings. CPU usage seems to skyrocket even in the menus, which is quite interesting to me, because when you look at the architecture of a lot of the newer consoles, usually they are a larger core count with some performance and efficiency cores. So I suppose interesting that's all seemingly not mapping well, or maybe it's just a bad port. I mean, who really knows? Then there are issues with shaders, which means, once again, folks, we've got to talk about shader compilation, which seems to pop up for just about every port. Yeah, the game actually does say, hey, you should let us compile shaders, right? Pre-compile shaders. Basically, it does let you jump right into the game without shaders compiled. You're just having them, compile in the background, but the game does actually warn you about performance issues. This is from PC Gamer, by the way. I chose to play the game immediately, and the shader progress only hit 40% in the 10 minutes I played before it crashed. Now, this is somebody who's playing, by the way, on an RTX 3080 Ti, a 12900K, and 32GB of RAM. And sure, while that may not be like the crazy oligarch 4090 computer, that is still powerful. So yes, you should wait to compile those shaders. Now, the unfortunate thing is this may take between 15 minutes and 2+ hours, which does mean that, now that our download speeds are fast enough that we don't have to wait 4, 5, 6 hours to download a game, it's at least comforting to know that time has been at least partially replaced by shader compilation. Absolutely lovely. Now, of course, the thing there is, if it takes 2 hours to compile the shaders, and Steam's automated refund cutoff is also 2 hours, well, you may not actually get to experience the game crashing before you are a little bit out of luck on your refunds, or at the very least have got to put in a bit more manual effort to get your refund money back. Then obviously there is the Steam Deck stuff. So Joel is Joel's not looking too hot, folks. He's not looking too hot. Now, of course, I would not claim that up here Neil was tweeting that this is like a build on a Steam Deck. He did just say, it'll be on the deck, don't worry, and then included an in-game screenshot. But, there is a very hilarious expectations versus reality, comparison that could be had. Now, I don't think that a reasonable read of Neil's original tweet is that this is what it would look like on a Steam Deck. But I suppose if you're perhaps not, you're not technically oriented or whatever, maybe you could think that that's what it would look like on a deck. I don't think that's necessarily the reasonable read, but certainly it is, I mean, come on, it is just really, really funny. Yeah, so what next then? Not next. What's going to be next from the very big brains, absolutely very, very, large and crinkly, strong brains. That decided to say that they would be ensuring good quality and meeting everybody's expectations. Oh dear. It's unfortunate, Obviously, the people who are handling communications for the game, they just have to handle communications, right? So they're not necessarily going to know that the game is up shit creek completely. They're just going to say, hey, we're delaying it so we can ensure the best quality. The person drafting that statement is obviously not going to be able to say, we're delaying it 4 weeks because we really, really, really need to. And honestly, it'll probably still be fucked when you get it. They can't say that, even if they know that, which ultimately means that Sony should have put their people in a position where they actually had time, and evidently a few weeks was not enough. Now, of course, it is highly unlikely that Iron Galaxy and Naughty Dog are going to leave the game in this pretty damn dire strait. Naughty Dog have actually responded within 6 hours saying, we've heard your concerns, we're actively investigating, multiple issues that you've reported. We will continue to update you, but our team is prioritizing updates and will address, things in upcoming patches. So a bit tricky. Sony's haste then in getting these ports out is certainly biting them in the ass, and for them that is kind of rough. This is a pretty major line of business. We know without a shadow of a doubt that these video games are system sellers. Right? I mean, Team Green is sitting there with nothing. Team Blue sitting here with a bunch of system seller games that, really allows them to get the console market share they want, and then just get a massive amount of PC gamer money. which I mean is fair enough. That we can play, Spider-Man and God of War in PC is absolutely brilliant. So I totally support this overall effort. And it really is great for PC gamers. Everyone has just realized that they cannot, they cannot grab us and shove us into a console, but what they can do is come to us with their shit and let us buy it, which I think is pretty good for us. And you may look at, Nixies, who have always had a pretty golden track record, and say, hey, why does Sony just not use Nixies for everything? But obviously, part number one, maybe Nixies are doing something else. Maybe they want to do something of their own. But in terms of this, this is Sony's big darling game, Sony's not releasing Resistance games anymore. Just hey, here's the Sony shooter. No. They've turned it into a massive tentpole thing. Right, with Horizon and stuff. So this is kind of rough overall, I suppose. Maybe they're going too fast. Overall, what I would say though, if you have not played The Last of Us Part 1 at all, I'd say it's a pretty brilliant experience. It really is. And if this does actually get fixed up, and maybe you can pick this up at a bit of a discount, it is something that I would wholeheartedly recommend that you go play. Yeah, I would. Now, of course, the full price thing, we'll have to see about that. At least the one thing I will say is, if you look here, 50 quid. Now, I'm not exactly sure what that will be for everybody in America, but for us here in the UK, that's low $60-something, I believe. So I think a fair enough price. If you were to buy this game new on the PS5 store in the UK, it would be more expensive. I have to assume that's the same for everybody over in the States. So on PC, we do get it a bit later, but we also do get it cheaper. And if this is eventually brought up to a stage of having absolutely fantastic performance, then yeah, it's actually a pretty great game. There's a reason why a lot of people got angry at The Last of Us Part 2. Some of that is maybe not the most reasonable. A lot of it is very reasonable. I, for my part, deeply dislike the narrative of Part 2. And it's not just because of the thing that happens in the first 2 hours of the game being controversial. It's not because of that for me necessarily. I think they could have done that plot beat. For me, it's just about the broad macro narrative design of the game. It's about its message. It's about the quality of the writing. It's about the depth of the characterizations. It's that sort of thing. I basically think that they exceeded their narrative. I think that their narrative ambitions vastly exceeded their, their actual quality of writing, how they actually chose to deliver that story. The thing is that because they're a Sony blockbuster, they're still able to make the thing look like some sort of 20-hour movie in the case of Part 2. But ultimately, it was one of those things that was I think it was trying to be quite smart, thinking it was quite smart, but in the end, I found it to be a pretty hollow narrative experience. I would not say that for Part 1, though, which does mean that this game gets a hearty recommend for me, but absolutely not right now. And as for why this happened, well, that's the bit that's kind of getting interesting. I'm not going to go and speculate about reasons why a PS5-only game is going to be a bit screwed on PC. Now, obviously, there are differences, right? Yes, it's probably, obviously, different GPU, different CPU, running in a different operating system. A game like, Part 1, you gotta remember, Part 1 Remaster was not cross-platform, and that may mean that certain technical considerations were not, made. One of the things for, the PS4, I don't believe it was that hard to port over to the PC, so maybe whatever's changed from the 4 to the 5, if you're trying to maximize what can be done on the 5 right now, maybe that is just going to lead to issues right now. Because you see, the thing with all of this is, it's not necessarily about, the overall difficulty of the task, it's about what bottlenecks, constrain you and where you're constrained. So it would be silly for me to try to speculate, but TLDR, not good. I mean, if I was to drop one quick thing as an example, the PS5 has 16 gigabytes of GDDR6 RAM, if I remember correctly, and that essentially works as a shared pool. Now, if you maybe have a GPU with 6 gigs or 8 gigs of RAM, well, that'll be an interesting situation where The Last of Us Part 1 was designed, architected to run on a system with 16 gigs shared memory. Your PC is going to be different. Maybe your GPU is, 6. Maybe your RAM is 16 or something. Hard to say, but I think you get my point. Anyway, that's basically it for today's story. I think we should probably end it on this great image of Joel with his very bushy eyebrows. Very bushy eyebrows indeed, so maybe you should get those trimmed. Unfortunate, and it does make me question why Sony felt it was okay to go ahead with this. If I try to discuss why, we're going back to all the normal things that we cover in the industry. Basically QA and time. QA should have, if it's having issues at this scale, QA should have been able to catch it, especially considering that they can afford, hundreds of QA testers, which does kind of change the game a little bit, especially with a lot of QA also being handled by outsourcing houses, to the point where I am sure it would not be that hard to find an outsourcing house that has some, available time in their schedule for especially a very, very, very high-profile client like Sony. Very bizarre. That is it, though. Let me know what your experience has been with this. Of course, if you want to support what we're doing, you can check out the game that we developed. It actually was one of the top 20 on Steam for the month of February, according to Steam's list, which just presents the top 20 in a randomized order every time you go to the page. We're all pretty chuffed about that. Anyway, so you can do that. Of course, you can check out this video next. And with that said, I'll see you next time.